When Clara Henderson received the unexpected news that she had inherited her late great-aunt's countryside house, she wasn't sure what to think. She had only visited the place once as a child, and even then, the property had carried a strange, heavy silence. The house had been abandoned for years after her great-aunt passed away without immediate heirs. Overgrown weeds, broken shutters, and vines that wrapped themselves like strangling hands around the wooden structure gave it the air of a forgotten relic. Yet, legally, the house was hers now, and curiosity tugged at her more than practicality. She decided to make the trip out to see what exactly she had been left. The drive from the city took nearly 4 hours. With each passing mile, the scenery changed from bustling highways to lonely country roads lined with bare trees and fading barns. Clara felt a mix of apprehension and duty. She had no plans to live in the old house, but she wanted to see it, to stand in its rooms and decide whether it was worth restoring or simply selling. As she turned onto the narrow gravel driveway, the house came into view, a sagging, 2-story structure with boarded windows, a collapsing porch, and an aura that made her stomach tighten. Stepping inside, Clara was met with the stale odor of dust, rot, and time. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing wallpaper peeling from the walls, cracked tiles, furniture shrouded in dusty white sheets. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a warning, but she pressed on, determined to catalog the property and maybe uncover something sentimental among her aunt's possessions. In the parlor, she found stacks of old photo albums, yellowed, letters tied with ribbon, and a grandfather clock that had long since stopped ticking. In the kitchen, pots still hung from hooks, and a rusted kettle sat on the stove as though waiting for water to boil. Everything seemed frozen in time, abandoned mid-life. Clara began to feel the strange sensation that the house had been left, too suddenly, as if its former owner had walked out the door one day and never returned. The upstairs was worse. Doors hung crooked on their hinges, and the bedrooms smelled of mildew. Yet, one room, her great-aunt's bedroom, was eerily preserved. The bed was neatly made, with a faded quilt stretched tight across it, and on the dresser sat a jewelry box still locked. Clara pocketed the small box, thinking she would try to find the key later, but it was in the basement where she stumbled, across something that changed everything. The wooden steps groaned under her weight as she descended into the dark. The basement was colder than the rest of the house, with stone walls slick from dampness. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Shelves stacked with canning jars, broken furniture, and boxes collapsing from moisture. But when her flashlight swept across the far wall, she froze. The beam of light revealed a door smaller than the others in the house. It's almost hidden behind a leaning cabinet. The wood was newer than the rest of the basement, and a padlock secured it shut. Clara's breath quickened. She shoved the cabinet aside, dust flying into her face, and crouched to examine the lock. It wasn't ancient. In fact, it seemed relatively new, as if someone had been there not too long ago. Her first instinct was to leave it alone, but curiosity gnawed at her. After rummaging through the basement, she found a rusted crowbar and pried the lock until it snapped. The door creaked open, and what she saw made her stumble backward. Behind the hidden door was a narrow, windowless room. Inside, the floor was lined with old newspapers, and the walls were covered in disturbing photographs, clippings, and scribbled notes. A single light bulb dangled from the ceiling, swaying slightly as if disturbed by her presence. And in the center of the room was a wooden chest, large and heavy. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were objects she could not immediately process, children's toys. Faded clothing, locks of hair tied in ribbons, and dozens of Polaroids of unfamiliar faces, mostly children and teenagers. The air seemed to close in on her. At the bottom of the chest were several notebooks, each filled with handwritten entries that grew more frantic and incoherent as the pages went on. Clara could barely breathe as she flipped through them, realizing they chronicled encounters, abductions, and acts too disturbing to fully comprehend. Her great-aunt had lived alone most of her life, or so the family had believed. Yet these belongings suggested otherwise. Someone had used the house, possibly even after her death, for something sinister. Clara staggered upstairs, clutching her phone, and with trembling hands, Al dialed the police. When officers arrived, their flashlights and radios filled the silence of the house. They descended into the basement, inspected the hidden room, and sealed it off as a crime scene. Clara watched from the porch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. As more vehicles arrived, marked cars, unmarked sedans, and eventually a van from forensics. The rural property lit up with red and blue lights, casting eerie shadows against the house. Investigators questioned her about her Grattan, about who might have had access to the house, about when she had last been there. Clara told them everything she knew, which was painfully little. The family had always spoken of her great-aunt as eccentric but harmless, a recluse who preferred solitude. No one had ever hinted at anything darker. Over the following days, news spread quickly. The local paper ran headlines about the house, of secrets, and neighbors came forward with memories of strange noises, unfamiliar visitors, and rumors they had dismissed for years. Detectives began piecing together timelines, linking the evidence to several cold cases of missing children from decades prior. The photographs matched some of those faces. Clara's world spiraled. What was supposed to be a simple inheritance had thrust her into the center of a nightmare. She grappled with guilt and had her family ignored signs. Had they overlooked the possibility that her Gratnan had been hiding something, or worse, complicit in it? Every call from the police brought new revelations, each darker than the last. Weeks passed, and the investigation expanded. Forensic teams uncovered more hidden compartments throughout the house, a false panel in a closet that concealed videotapes, another chest buried beneath the floorboards, and chemical residues that suggested attempts at preserving evidence. Became clear the house had not merely been abandoned. It had been deliberately concealed, a lair of secrets meant to stay buried. Clara struggled with the weight of it all. She hadn't just inherited a house, she had inherited a legacy of horror. The community eyed her with suspicion, pity, and morbid curiosity. She avoided speaking to the media, choosing instead to cooperate quietly with investigators. At night, she replayed the discovery over and over in her mind, haunted by the faces in those Polaroids, the desperation captured in their eyes. Eventually, law enforcement confirmed that at least some of the evidence tied directly to a series of unsolved disappearances spanning 20 years. The files suggested multiple people may have been involved, not just her Grattan. The house had likely served as a meeting place, a hideout, or worse, a prison. Clara could not bring herself to set foot inside again. The property was seized as evidence, its decrepit walls stripped and searched until every nail and beam was catalogued. When the police finally released it back to her, Clara made the decision without hesitation. She would not keep it, she arranged for its demolition, unwilling to let the place stand as a monument to cruelty. On the day the house was torn down, she stood at a distance, watching as the machines reduced it to rubble. Dust filled the air, and with it she felt a strange sense of release. But the knowledge of what had been inside of the lives affected would never leave her. The inheritance had changed her, forcing her into a reality she could never have imagined. Clara had come seeking closure, maybe even a sentimental connection to her family's past. Instead, she uncovered a secret so dark it demanded police intervention, unraveling not just the story of a house, but of lives lost and justice delayed. In the end, what she truly inherited was not property, but the burden of truth that had been hidden behind rotting wood and locked doors, waiting for someone brave enough or unlucky enough to open them.